Let's find domain for the given function 4 all over 1 minus e to the x. Let's solve the equation where 1 minus e to the x equals to 0, because that's when the denominator of this fraction is 0. That means that 1 is equal to e to the x. That happens when x is 0. So this is the point we should exclude from the domain. It basically looks like this. X as the input, and there's a hole at x equals to 0. Using integral notation, we will write down that the domain is from minus infinity to 0, parenthesis means we don't include 0, union means and, from 0 to plus infinity. The important part are those parentheses. We don't use brackets when we don't include the bad point. For b, we have a square root of 1 minus 2 to the t. Remember that the inputs for the square root have to be positive. Thus, we need to solve the inequality in this case. 1 minus 2 to the t, where is it negative? To exclude those points. Or you can write down positive and include those points. So, I will have to solve this inequality by relocating terms. And I also would like to write down that not 1 is less than 2 to the t, but 2 to the t is larger than 1, and solve this inequality. Well, there are several ways of doing it. I'll show you graphically. When t is the input, the graph of the function 2 to the t looks like so. There's a point here called 0, 1. Thus, this height is 1. Thus, at this specific moment, 2 to the t equals to 1. On the right, when t is positive, graph of the function is larger than 1. So this is when we don't want to have those inputs. Otherwise, when t is less than 0, this is when 2 to the t is less than 1, which is good. And that's going to be our domain. Well, before we had 2 to the t greater than 1, which was bad. Do you remember why? Because we had 1 minus 2 to the t inside of the square root, and it must be positive. So, 2 to the t is greater than 1 when t is positive. Thus, domain should have negative t's. T is less than 0. Integral notation gives us the answer. It's from minus infinity to 0. Interesting point to say here that do we include 0 or we don't include 0? In this case, should we use parentheses or should we use brackets? Let's think about it a little bit. We know that the square root of negative numbers does not exist. But what happens when t is 0, then 1 minus 2 to the 0 becomes 1 minus 1, and it gives you 0. Square root of 0 is 0. It's not a bad point. Thus, we include the 0 in the domain for this case. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. While you want to move to another example, I wanted to show you the second way of solving the inequality 2 to the t in greater than 1, because we did it graphically. But what if you don't want to use the graphical approach? I personally like to apply ln to the both sides. When you apply natural log to the both sides, you will have ln of 2 to the t larger than ln of 1. Well, t can go down, and by going down I mean multiply. T times ln of 2 is greater than ln of 1. That is the property of logarithmic functions. And now I can solve for t. T will be larger than ln 1 over ln 2. Well, we're supposed to have t larger than 0, right? But ln of 1 is what? 0. Thus, we have t larger than 0, and it worked well. So that's what I would do because it's kind of faster. But It all depends if you remember the graph of the function or you don't. That's the only, I guess, difference.